Welcome to the historical dioramas of the Ayala Museum. The dioramas were conceptualized in 1967 under the guidance of Carlos Quirino, National Artist for Historical Literature and Ayala Museum's first director. Master carvers from Paite, Laguna carved and transformed pieces of Batikuling wood into Lapu-Lapu's victory over Magellan in the Battle of Mactan, and this became Ayala Museum's first diorama. Led by Quirino, local historians like Rey Resurreccion and Juvenal Velasco selected for the diorama project 60 Philippine historical events that helped shape the Philippines as a nation. Visual artists and craftsmen added structural and landscape details that gave the dioramas their lifelike quality. Such things as fruits, the foliage of trees, books, weapons, or a herd of animals, despite being minuscule, were crafted with expert attention to detail. 7 years after the project was conceived, the dioramas were opened to the public in 1974. Today, we invite you to relive Philippine history at the Ayala Museum. Let us begin the tour. Land bridges linked the Philippines to the Asian continent and allowed the migration of prehistoric men and animals from one continent to another. The early Filipinos were hunters and gatherers who used simple tools made of stone. Our ancestors developed tools for their different activities. They made special jars for their burial practices, developed pottery for cooking and storage, and forged metal weapons and implements. In 5000 BC, the great glaciers melted and covered the land bridges with water. The changes in climate and the environment had a significant effect on our ancestors' way of life. They turned from hunting and gathering to agriculture and fishing. Around 1150 AD, early Filipino farmers built the Banawe rice terraces in the Cordillera Mountains. These renowned terraces, with their elaborate irrigation system, are monuments to the ingenuity of prehistoric Filipinos. Chinese and Arab merchants soon arrived, and they influenced the development of early Philippine society in many ways. As the Chinese exchanged goods with our ancestors, they also brought with them their customs and founded settlements along coastal towns. Muslim traders introduced Islam to the people of Sulu, initiating the spread of this religion throughout Mindanao. It was Ferdinand Magellan's expedition of 1521, however, that left an indelible mark on the country when he brought Christianity to the islands. A Thanksgiving Mass was held in Cebu, and the natives were impressed by the solemnity of the foreign ritual performed before them. They embraced Catholicism, paving the way for further evangelization and later Spanish colonization of the Philippines. It is said that the Spaniards conquered the Philippines using both the sword and the cross. While many Filipinos willingly converted to Christianity, others met the Spaniards with aggression and faced the colonizers' advanced weaponry. Lapu-Lapu defeated and killed Magellan in the Battle of Mactan, and he is recognized as the first Filipino to have successfully resisted Spanish invasion. On the other hand, Raja Sikatuna of Bohol accepted Spanish rule and entered into a blood compact with Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, securing a pact of peace and friendship between his people and the Spaniards. Miguel Lopez de Legazpi continued his conquest of the islands, claiming Cebu and Manila in the name of the Spanish Empire. A Filipino foundryman called Panday Pira was said to have forged the cannons that the natives of Manila used to defend themselves against the invading foreigners. Following the fall of Manila, the conquistadors commissioned Panday Pira to provide them with the artillery for the defense of Legazpi's newly founded city. Manila began to take shape as a Spanish colonial territory. Streets were laid out and homes were built for the new settlers. With Legazpi's death, however, the city was deemed by other foreigners as weak and vulnerable to attacks. The notorious Chinese pirate Limahong attempted to take over the Spanish settlement, but his forces were repulsed by the Spanish forces led by Juan de Salcedo. Finally, with the successful conquest of the islands, the Spaniards turned their attention to the spiritual conversion of the natives. Missionaries discovered that providing medical services was a crucial tool in evangelization. So they established hospitals to symbolize the salvation of body and soul. One of the earliest hospitals, established by Brother Juan Clemente, would come to be known as the San Juan de Dios Hospital. The colonial government introduced printing, and the first book printed was the Doctrina Christiana. The Doctrina Christiana was a manual for Catholic instruction and was also instrumental to the success of their evangelical missions in the Philippines. Let us take a break from our dioramas to examine the way our ancestors traveled. You may have noticed that the story of our country and our people involved a lot of seafaring, with their boats directed by the wind and guided by the stars. Maritime trade flourished in the Philippines because of its unique strategic location in Asia, and ancient boats such as the Chinese junk, the Arabian bagla, and the Spanish galleon were seen plying our shores. Trade activities fueled by Chinese merchants played a crucial role in the flourishing of the galleon trade. The Chinese population in the colony grew steadily and rapidly. The Spanish community soon became fearful of its political consequences, and tension between the Spaniards and Chinese reached a bloody climax in the uprising of 1603, where much of the Chinese population of Manila perished. To help maintain colonial order, the Spanish government saw the importance of continuous training of its men. Institutions of higher learning were built, and religious orders took the lead in this effort. In 1611, the Dominicans built the Royal and Pontifical University of Santo Tomas. The country's political situation continued to evolve and became more complex. Armed resistance against the Spaniards continued. While much of the archipelago adapted to life under Spanish rule, Muslim-controlled Mindanao resisted subjugation, and fearless leaders like Sultan Kudarat led his people against the Spaniards. The Spanish government still regarded the Chinese as a threat to the order. Chinese traders and settlers were kept in segregation and allowed to occupy only the parian, or ghettos, outside the walls of Intramuros. Trade developed in these communities, which were always within firing range of the cannons of Intramuros, should things get out of hand. And because both church and state figured prominently in the colonization and administration of the islands, there were always numerous conflicts and struggles for power between them. The most horrid incident of which was the assassination of Governor General Fernando Bustamante, which was led by a group of friars and carried out by officials, friars, and Chinese merchants. The colonial period was specially marked by unjust practices against the natives, and those oppressed often took to the hills outside the town center and past the reach of the friars. Francisco Dagohoy and his followers established a community in the hills of Bohol, and from time to time they would launch surprise attacks on the Spanish garrisons and looted churches. This would last for 85 years. Despite the political tumult throughout the Spanish occupation, the Philippine economy thrived for 250 years because of the Manila Galleon trade. These big Spanish ships sailed annually between Acapulco and Manila, carrying luxury goods of Chinese origin and other precious cargo. When the British forces invaded Manila during the Seven-Year War in Europe, the economy took a nosedive. The war had been against France, but Britain invaded Manila because of Spain's alliance with the French. It was a quick takeover by the British, and this exposed the vulnerability of Spanish colonial rule. When the British returned Manila to Spain in 1764, Spain made sure to incorporate the colony more effectively into their imperial structure to prevent such takeovers in the future. Entrepreneurial efforts were then launched to boost economic recovery. One example of the efforts undertaken was the development of the Santa Ynez mines in the Sierra Madre mountain range. While under the helm of Francis Xavier Delgado, the Santa Ynez mine supplied iron that was superior to iron mined elsewhere in the archipelago and provided livelihood, goods, and services for the people. Arts and culture flourished in 19th century Philippine society. In 1811, the country's first newspaper publication, Del Superior Gobierno, began circulation, carrying with it news from abroad. It folded up after only 15 issues. In less than a decade, however, newspapers would prove crucial to the Philippine revolutionary movement. Damian Domingo, the first Filipino painter to specialize in secular themes, opened his first school of fine arts in 1821. The Academia de Dibujo opened its doors to Filipinos who had previously been banned from entering art schools. With the opening of the archipelago's ports to non-Spanish vessels, economic prosperity came to the country's capital. Manila began to uplift its cultural profile. Escolta blossomed as a commercial hub, and a series of public works and communications projects were undertaken, culminating with the operation of the first tranvías, or streetcars. Religious practices like regular Sunday Mass became elaborate social rituals where status and wealth were on display. The despotic rule of Queen Isabella II in Spain was toppled by the 1868 Spanish Revolution and paved the way for liberal reforms there. Governor-General to the Philippines Carlos Maria de la Torre hosted a reception to celebrate the success of that revolution and then introduced liberal reforms in the colony. De la Torre's liberalism paved the way for the formation of revolutionary associations and the empowerment of Filipino leaders. A generation of middle-class Filipinos known as the Ilustrados surfaced, insisting on equality and believing that religion must not suppress the liberties of the people. They became members of the Freemasons and championed nationalist and separatist causes. They became instrumental in spreading the ideals of government, freedom, and equality to the Filipinos. One of these Freemason Ilustrados was Jose Rizal. His novels Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo exposed the atrocities of the Spanish government in the hopes of instigating outrage in his countrymen so that they may call for reforms. His novels were banned, and he was soon arrested, but not before his writings inspired the secret society called KKK, or Kataas-Taasang Kagalang-Galangang Katipunan ng mga Anak ng Bayan, to finally take arms against Spain. Filipino patriots led by Andres Bonifacio began to plan for a revolution. Bonifacio organized the Katipunan, and its ideology was brought home to each member through the society's initiation ritual. Each new member signed into this secret society with his own blood to signify his willingness to shed his blood and die for the cause. On August 23, 1896, the Katipuneros gathered in Caloocan, and in the event that came to be called the Cry of Pugadlawin, renounced the colonial government's stranglehold on them with the tearing of their cedulas or tax certificates. Armed with bolos and knives, the Katipuneros proclaimed themselves free from Spain and initiated a revolution. The prisoner Jose Rizal, branded by the Spanish government as the soul of the rebellion, was sentenced to death by firing squad in a farce of a trial. On December 30, 1896, the day of the execution, Rizal walked firmly and solemnly to the square. Rizal had his back to the firing squad, but he twisted around as the soldiers fired and fell face upwards in the breaking dawn.